I'm Lori Barklage for Birthing Peace Within, where I support families and caregivers through pregnancy and birth trauma. I support their healing and their recovery, support them learning new tools and ways of investing their energy to become better care providers and better parents. I've worked with parents who had PTSD for a very long time, decades. I've worked with women who are in their 50s and are still struggling with the experience that they had 30 years ago. I describe birth trauma as any time that parents don't feel comfortable and competent being the parents of their child. They often have experienced an emotional, sometimes a physical trauma that has left them questioning themselves, questioning whether or not they're capable, disempowered, or coerced into making what was billed to them as choices. They have left their birth not feeling like they've made a complete transition into parenthood. It does not necessarily mean that there's a physical trauma that could be described to others, and as such, it is often dismissed. They're often told to, well, be glad you've got a healthy baby, count your blessings, what I call being at leasted. At least you've got a healthy baby, at least you can have another one, at least you're okay. They're being told by people, at least the baby's going to be home soon, at least they were in a hospital where they could get good ICU care. Many people don't believe it because they don't hear about it, because people don't talk about it, because when they do try to reach out about it, they are dismissed and they're told to count their blessings and they're expected to just move on and be happy that they have a healthy baby, because after all, not everybody does. I feel like we're trying to comfort and we don't have the tools. That's a very common problem because we're uncomfortable with the thought of mom and baby not being well. Because what does that mean for us? If they had what didn't look to us to be traumatic, yet they're feeling traumatized, what would happen if we looked at our experience? Quite often the healing that comes from a new mom can ripple backwards, and she can have those conversations with her parents and talk about what their experiences were like. I've worked with people who were able to open up a dialogue with their grandparents because of the healing that they've experienced, and it's something that their grandparents and maybe parents did not even think to address because they were told, oh, they should be grateful that they had it as good as they did. The amount of dismissal that's heaped upon families who've experienced a traumatic pregnancy or birth is really incredible. There's a lot that goes into the emotional health of families who have been born into parenthood, and too often that's not captured in trying to describe to somebody what a pregnancy or birth trauma is. One of the factors that makes addressing pregnancy and birth trauma so tricky right now is the fact that quite often the pregnancy and birth trauma was perpetuated by the current birthing system. We have care providers who have experienced incredible trauma and then had to just be back at work or the next day, the next hour. We have them stuffing the fears and concerns that they have. We also have a system that is penalizing them financially if things don't go well, quote unquote, well in medical terms, whether it was something of their doing or not. We have the fear of malpractice. I've heard it said that doctors don't get sued for the cesareans they do, but only for the ones they don't. It can be a really difficult thing to navigate when you have care providers who are trying to make sure they have a good outcome, and in using that as an excuse, they coerce families into treatments and tests and procedures that they would not otherwise do. An episiotomy that's done so that the doctor doesn't have to worry about a baby being stuck. You have doctors who are caring for the person that's in front of them based on traumas of a different situation. They have seen a mom and baby who did not do well after this exact experience, and because they're treating the person by their traumas, they actually end up perpetuating more traumas. You have the insurance companies who are pushing from the sidelines for things that none of the families are asking for. The fact that we're not talking enough about the way that the current medical system contributes to it is a huge problem. There's so many layers to this. That's even before you touch the epigenetic traumas and the traumas of mom's daily life. Is this someone who is having a hard time eating nutritious foods because they don't have the finances? Is this a mom who's working 2 jobs in addition to being pregnant? We see Black women and babies are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in pregnancy, childbirth. There is a huge component of racism to this. There is an even bigger component of epigenetic trauma to this. The women that are experiencing a birth in the hospital right now are carrying the load of their trauma, their ancestors' trauma, the possibility that they're going to be treated in a racist manner, which is absolutely not out of the question, unfortunately. We've got parents who are struggling with their daily lives and taking on that load of their ancestors, and the inherent racism in the system right now ensures that they're going to have a much more difficult time, and it's something that must be addressed. The aspects of pregnancy and birth trauma that's often overlooked is what the partners of someone who's given birth feel, largely because they aren't the ones being checked in with. They're not the ones who have a doula and a midwife to support them, but also because they have often had a very different perspective of what's going on than the person who's giving birth, and will feel very helpless. And especially when you take someone who's been in a caregiver and protector role, and then they're afraid. They don't necessarily know what's going on. They see the trauma of their partner and of their child. They're often fearful that their child or baby will die, because in all the movies, wherever there's something traumatic that happens, it's always, oh, mom, we lost the mom, we lost the baby. So there's this idea that it's far more common than it is. And it does happen. The partners are often left without enough support. They also get it leasted. Sometimes they disagree with that assessment. Maybe mom and baby aren't necessarily okay, but people see a live mom and a live baby as being okay. There's not enough attention being paid to the total load that's being placed on parents at the birth of a parent. There are quite a few ways that people can heal from their experience. It's generally not just waiting, though. Many people do find comfort in their faith. Others find comfort in talking with other families who've experienced what they did. The way that I work with people is in helping them reclaim the energy that's invested in that problem. We do a series of energy balancing techniques in addition to some coaching that helps you learn how do you manage your energy now that you know that that's not how you want it invested anymore. Our bodies are amazing at protecting us from things we don't feel ready to handle. And when we decide that we're ready to handle those things, often the tools will be provided for us to be able to work through them. And that's one of the things I do, is help teach people tools to help them manage their energy and their healing surrounding the pregnancy and birth trauma.
My name is Allison Lane, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I specialize in working with women and children who've experienced trauma or have complex needs such as postpartum depression, grief and loss, or life transitions. One of the things that I've noticed in working with women who have either experienced trauma or experiencing postpartum depression or PTSD, particularly around parenting or birth trauma, is that there is a myth that we sort of perpetuate in this culture, that women are supposed to be perfect, that women are supposed to be good moms, they're supposed to be able to manage being a mother and work or working from home. And there's so much associated with that we're exposed to through the media that make us feel like we're not doing enough. So for instance, even when you see commercials or TV shows with who are just managing it all, then you start to perceive yourself as less than or incapable. So it's scary to reach out, because it's hard to admit that as a mother you feel like you're not doing the best that you can do. And that's the perception that you have. And often we want to hide those things. We don't want to share that we feel like whatever's happened to us, it means that we've done something wrong. This also occurs when we see other women in public with their children. We make assumptions about what that means about us and how we're managing our own experiences and what's happened to us. So often we compare ourselves to others in a way that makes us or individuals feel less than. And it makes it hard to reach out. And taking that first step is probably the worst or the most difficult because it's just scary. So once individuals have done that, then it's a little bit easier to walk in the door. But it's that first session and that first phone call that is the hardest. After experiencing either a birth trauma or postpartum depression, there's a great site contact information for women who recently having given birth in that postpartum period is Postpartum Support International, and that is just simple support for postpartum depression, birth trauma, anything associated with birth and loss or grief. And there's lots of resources there, and I would also assume that on that number they can connect you with local resources. The other thing you can do is you can reach out to your local crisis line. Every county or counties have a main body that connects individuals who have mental illness with counseling agencies. You can go to the website Psychology Today and look at therapists and look for therapists who specialize in postpartum depression or birth trauma or working with women in general. Those specialists should be trained in evidence-based treatments for postpartum depression or trauma. And some of those treatments include eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's evidence-based for trauma as well as anxiety. Cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy is effective for suicidal clients and clients who have borderline personality disorder, or interpersonal therapy has been found to be effective for women experiencing postpartum depression.